saw Sean Brady get the win over Michael Chiesa via unanimous decision. You know, I said this fight should have been the main event. And then you look at kind of what ended up happening. And if anything, it only confirmed it for me. This was a fight where Michael Chiesa essentially ran out of time.
Yeah.
For the majority of this first 2 rounds, Sean Brady did a great job of he was out muscling Michael Chiesa, out wrestling Michael Chiesa. Whoever does that to a guy like him.
Yeah.
But then Michael Chiesa, to his credit, this is the best his striking has ever looked. The jab was on point. He was landing it effectively with some power, and he was hurting Sean Brady every time he landed. And in round 3, he finally got some space to really go to work, and he just kind of ran out of time.
Yeah,
he ended the fight on top, but it wasn't enough of a one-sided round to give him a 10-8. So ultimately, it was a pretty clear 2-1 for Sean Brady. It's a good win. But, Dominic, I'm curious, when you got done watching this fight, this is the biggest one of Sean Brady's career. It's going to move him very close in the top 5.
Yeah.
But it's obvious this isn't just a complete positive takeaway of this fight. So was this a fight that you feel like the positives or the negatives as far as Sean Brady's performance were the most striking to you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So as we went back and forth in the group chat during this fight more than we did any other fight last night. And we were talking about how, or at least I said, his physical strength and grappling is definitely amongst these top 5 guys with those title contenders. But his striking, there's a lot of vulnerability there. If you're getting pieced up like that against Michael Chiesa, who is a grappler, known as a grappler, then obviously there's still plenty that needs to be improved upon before you really get into contender talks. And while he is going to launch himself in to that top 10 and potentially maybe take the number 6 spot, I don't know. I'll be curious to see how they kind of do it on Tuesday morning. Regardless, he's now thrown into the wolves of this division because everyone now that he's going to be a player with are amongst the elite at 170 pounds. And a lot of them have very well-rounded skill sets. So I don't know if necessarily – you would think that if he can out-grapple and out-wrestler a grappler and Michael Chiesa, well, then he could definitely do it against guys like, Leon Edwards, Luke Hay, Stephen Thompson, etc. But these guys are going to be much more competent on the feet and not just going to give way, and they're going to cause a lot more problems in the stand-up realm for him to set up those takedowns. So what outweighs more from that performance? I'll still give him the benefit of the doubt and say I was more impressed with kind of his positives being that strength and grappling. But, man, that's the striking vulnerability is right there neck and neck for me that almost kind of takes the cake. And maybe tomorrow I would think differently. But still a great performance nonetheless. Again, on Friday, I didn't know if he could live up to this test. This was a huge stepping stone for Brady because Chiesa is so much far ahead of the competition he's fought before. So they really launched him in here. And it maybe says a lot about what the UFC believes and thinks of Brady in his future. Still very young, a lot of room to grow. So at the end of the day, all the negatives aside, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as Noah put here in the headline, it was still a great performance nonetheless from Brady.
See, I'm actually going to go the other way where I was more – my bigger takeaway were the striking deficiencies. And this isn't meant to be like a negative or a knock on Sean Brady necessarily. I'm actually kind of glad that I got to see this because Sean Brady, his best win up to this point was Jake Matthews, who's a good fighter, but that just shows the levels when you go from someone like that to Michael Chiesa. And we already knew that Sean Brady was an exceptional grappler, an exceptional wrestler. And he showed that he's even better at that than we even thought. He out-muscled Michael Chiesa, which is something I don't know if I've ever said before. However, we had no idea where his striking was, in terms of when you get to high level. And what's interesting is I didn't think that was going to be answered in this fight because Michael Chiesa is not much of a striker himself. He's a big guy. He's huge for welterweight. I mean, it's kind of crazy. This guy fought at lightweight at one point for a long time. And I mean, he's massive for welterweight. So he has some power, but he's not a fluid striker at all. And he was piecing up Sean Brady. And, I want to give a lot of credit to Chiesa, say like, it's the best his striking's ever looked. But it's hard to say that because I felt like Brady was kind of just giving him a stationary target, wasn't moving his head a lot, didn't have the best guard in place on the feet. And ultimately those jabs were just sniping through his guard and just kind of, each one of them snapped his head back. It just, you could tell they had a great effect on him. Now, when he moves forward, you look at the rest of the division in that top 5 and the champion, of course, is he going to be able to out wrestle the top wrestlers in the division? And when you get to Colby Covington and when you get Kamaru Usman, I don't know. But I can say right now for certain, he won't be able to outstrike anybody in front of him.
Yep.
Now, he can definitely out wrestle. Obviously, he's going to have clear advantages against Luque, Edwards, Thompson when it comes to that wrestling. So that's going to be very interesting fights. And I actually would be very intrigued to see one of those happen. But after a win like this, where he wins, biggest win of his career, but there were some glaring holes that got brought up, I'd actually like to see him not get thrown into the top 5 in terms of matchmaking next. I'd actually like to see him still fight someone a little lower, kind of like what I was saying for Ketlin Vieira, but for different reasons. I just, this guy isn't showing to be Khamzat Chimaev right now. And I know that this was a tougher fight than Khamzat had with Jing Liang, but Khamzat right now is the one that everybody thinks has like no holes. He's looks like a perfect specimen because every time out there he's not getting touched and he's dominating people. After this win, Brady's not that. And we don't even know if Khamzat's really that for certain. But Brady, the shines kind of wore off. All right. He's a great prospect, but he's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to clean up some of those deficiencies on the feet. That's why I'd like to see him go up against someone like the Leech. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
The Leech, they would give the Jing Liang a chance to really, I guess, show maybe that it was a fluke that, he can fight against a great grappler and stay on the feet. And he's going to have a clear striking advantage and power advantage. Or you have a guy like Neil Magny or someone like that who
that would be
is constantly a tough test in this top 10. But, if you put Brady against Magny, you're probably not going to get a very exciting fight. So what do you want out of your top prospect here? Do you want a matchup that's going to be more of a fun fight, something that could more clearly get him a fan base and potentially, if he wins, really make him look better in terms of putting him up against top 5 competition? Or do you want someone who he's going to have the more clear advantages over, but might be a pretty dull fight and he's still going to kind of go under the radar for a while? That's the decision that the UFC is going to have to come up with. Dominic, do you have a direction you're leaning for Sean Brady right now?
I do. Thankfully, he kind of gave it to me in his post-fight presser last night, but he thought that the winner of Stephen Thompson and Bilal Muhammad happening next month would make sense. And I'm kind of here for that because in one realm, if Wonderboy were to win, Brady is going to have obviously that grappling advantage as we discussed, but the striking of Wonderboy is next level, especially with that karate background. So that's a whole different beast that Brady's going to have to deal with. Should Bilal win and beat Wonderboy next month, it's the December 18th card. Bilal is a guy, first off, they were matched up together before, and Brady had to pull out. So you have that there, where it was already kind of in the UFC's head. To add on to that, Bilal is, as Noah always says when we discuss him, kind of just good everywhere, but not great in any particular skill set. So how would he fare against a guy like Brady, who is going to definitely have that grappling advantage, but Muhammad's still kind of good on the feet, can defend himself in the clinch and on the ground. So I think that would make sense, and it's still kind of giving him a real player per se in this division. But again, the Magny fight, I really like the idea of that as well that you mentioned. So regardless, I'm definitely excited to see Brady fight again, to see the improvements he will continue to make along or to coincide with that great grappling that he has. And real quick, just before we move on to the last headline before the rest, what do you think for Chiesa after a loss like this where he did get dominated in his realm of grappling, but you did see that striking look better. But as you said, maybe it wasn't necessarily because of that, because Brady's not great. What do you think could be next for a guy like Chiesa?
I mean, Chiesa is kind of putting himself into that position where he is the welterweight Dos Anjos right now. He is the guy that the UFC is going to want to use to be a test for a lot of these up-and-comers who kind of need that test to see how real are they. Because if you can beat Michael Chiesa, that probably says you're a level above the guys who can't.
Yeah.
It's an interesting spot because these are back-to-back losses. I still I look at Michael Chiesa pretty high. I mean,
yeah.
Do I necessarily think he's going to win a title? No. But I wasn't opposed. Like, I was one of those guys that said if he beat Luque, he probably should fight for a title.
Yeah.
Luque won. Now it's up in the air who's going to get the next title shot there. But he follows that up with a loss here to Brady in a fight that it's hard because you look at it and it's like, yeah, he clearly lost the fight. But also, like, you look at how much he came on strong at the end, and if this fight went to a fourth round, I have a hard time seeing Brady coming out of that unscathed.
Yeah.
I mean, unless he could, for rounds 4 and 5, do what he did in the first 2.5 rounds, but I don't know if he could. And so because of that, it's like this fight didn't really hurt Michael Chiesa. It just set him back, I guess. It didn't set him back any more, in my opinion, than the Luque loss did.
Yeah.
And because of that, if the matchup really doesn't matter. He's already got the win over Neil Magny, so I mean I wouldn't do that again. But you got again Li Jingliang's another good option. I like that fight again. That's another one that I'll keep throwing the leech into some of these matchups. I don't know who's if there's someone else that I'm not thinking of in the back half of the top 15. I'd be interested in hearing it, but he's one of those guys that could fight anybody in and around 10 to 15, or even someone falling down from the top 5 or 6. Fun fact, though, or funny thing that you mentioned, the Wonder Boy Bilal fight. I actually think the loser of that fight makes a lot of sense for Sean Brady. Instead of the winner, I think the winner could probably get himself a bigger matchup. But for Sean Brady, who's still showing some big holes and needs some more development, I think the loser of that fight actually makes a lot of sense for him.
I like that.
But what do you think for Michael Chiesa?
It's hard, man, because like you said, I still do kind of believe in him. I enjoy the way he fights. His skill set's very good. He does seem to continue to be improving with his striking, regardless of who the opponent is. And it is a guy that I still feel, should he route, maybe, like you said, he's on a skid right now, but if he tallies off 2, 3, 4 more wins, he could put himself right back into contention again where he was before that Luque fight. So I'm definitely, not writing off Chiesa. He's still only 33 years old. He has a lot of experience. And still a guy that, like I said, is continuing to grow. So, guys like Li Jingliang, maybe the winner of Jeff Neal Ponzinibbio coming up next month, fights like that back half, that top 10-ish area makes sense. And I'm excited to see what Chiesa, he said he's going to come out in 2022 real hungry, and I'm looking to see kind of how he wants to capitalize on this and right the wrongs.